Last year alone, recorded crime across major UK cities quietly climbed while police response times stretched longer than many people realize. And most of us didn't notice until our routines started changing. Ask yourself this. How much of your daily energy is being quietly drained by the city you live in? Not through headlines or sirens, but through small decisions. Taking longer routes, avoiding certain hours, double-checking doors, staying mentally alert when you should be focused. This isn't just a safety issue anymore. It's a productivity tax, paid in time, attention, and mental bandwidth. And this video isn't fear bait. It's a pattern analysis. By the end, you'll know which UK cities are slipping, why it matters to your focus, and the small awareness shifts that actually help you stay in control. Rising crime rarely hits people all at once. It seeps into daily life quietly, through small adjustments that slowly add up. Commutes get longer because certain routes no longer feel worth the risk. Errands shift to daylight hours, not for convenience, but caution. Social plans become selective. Fewer evening outings, fewer spontaneous stops, more mental calculations before leaving home. None of this feels dramatic on its own, but together it creates a constant background tension. That low-level alertness has a name: cognitive drag. It's the mental load of always scanning, always adjusting, always staying one step ahead, even when nothing actually happens. Over time, that drag eats into focus, patience, and energy, leaving people more tired without understanding why. And this is the key point. This isn't about individual fear or overreaction. It's about system strain. When policing resources thin out, response times stretch, and prevention weakens, everyday life absorbs the cost. The cities we're about to look at aren't failing because of the people who live there. They're showing early signs of pressure in the systems meant to keep daily life predictable and mentally manageable. Number 1. London. London sits at the top of this list not because it is uniquely unsafe, but because its sheer scale hides warning signs longer than anywhere else. When crime volumes rise in a city this large, the impact doesn't arrive as a sudden shock. It spreads thinly, quietly, and unevenly. Policing capacity struggles to stretch across millions of people, thousands of streets, and constantly shifting pressure points. On paper, the system still functions. In daily life, the strain shows up differently. People begin adjusting routes without consciously realizing why. A 5-minute shortcut is abandoned for a longer, busier road. Travel times creep up, not because of traffic, but because predictability feels safer than speed. This is where normalization becomes the real risk. When background incidents become expected rather than exceptional, vigilance replaces ease. Residents start checking phones more often, scanning surroundings more carefully, and planning movements with extra buffers, just in case. None of this feels dramatic. It feels sensible. But over time, it creates friction. Productivity suffers not through lost hours, but through fragmented attention. Focus is broken by constant micro-decisions. Is this station worth using? Is this area fine at this hour? Should I take the longer way today? London's scale masks severity because problems don't dominate the skyline, they disperse. The city absorbs pressure until, suddenly, it doesn't. When a system this large reaches its limits, the shift feels abrupt precisely because the warning signs were spread so thin. What makes London different isn't fear, it's diffusion. The bigger the city, the easier it is for rising strain to hide inside normal routines, slowly converting convenience into caution and efficiency into effort without ever announcing itself loudly. Number 2. Birmingham. Birmingham highlights a different kind of pressure, not scale, but response delay. In recent years, the warning signs here haven't come from dramatic spikes in crime alone, but from stretched emergency response times that quietly alter how people plan their days. When police and emergency services take longer to arrive, the message absorbed by residents isn't panic, it's uncertainty. And uncertainty is corrosive to routine. People begin to assume help may not be immediate, which subtly shifts behavior. Small incidents that once felt manageable now carry extra weight, and that weight shows up in planning. Trips are bundled together to avoid multiple outings. Certain neighborhoods are bypassed entirely, not because of headlines, but because word-of-mouth travels faster than official reports. This is where underreported spillover matters. Crime doesn't stay neatly within boundaries. Pressure migrates. Areas once considered neutral become maybe not today zones, and that hesitation ripples outward. Reliability takes the hit. Appointments require larger time buffers. Evening schedules shrink. Flexibility, one of the biggest productivity advantages in modern life, quietly disappears. The real cost isn't fear, but friction. When response delays become part of the mental calculation, people stop optimizing for efficiency and start optimizing for predictability. Birmingham's situation shows how systems can appear stable while daily life grows less dependable. On paper, services still operate. In practice, residents compensate for delay by overplanning, double-checking, and limiting exposure. That constant adjustment drains mental energy, especially for adults juggling work, family, and responsibilities. What makes this dangerous isn't the delay itself, it's how quickly people adapt to it. Once a slower response becomes expected, routines harden around caution, and the city's rhythm shifts. Productivity suffers not because people do less, but because everything takes more effort to organize, more time to execute, and more attention to feel secure doing it. Number 3. Manchester. Manchester sits at the center of a growing tension between a vibrant nighttime economy and the pressure that comes with it. Late-hour retail, transport hubs, and entertainment districts are designed to extend productivity and opportunity beyond the traditional workday. But when incidents cluster around evenings and nights, unpredictability creeps in, and unpredictability is what erodes trust in public spaces. People don't stop going out altogether. They start modifying how, when, and how long. Trains are caught earlier than planned. A final stop is skipped. A short walk becomes a ride share. Each choice feels minor, but together they add a quiet time cost. Retailers feel it too. Footfall drops not because demand disappears, but because hesitation rises. Transport becomes less about efficiency and more about exit strategies. The nighttime economy thrives on flow, and flow depends on confidence. When that confidence weakens, routines fracture. What replaces it is extra caution, scanning platforms, waiting in brighter areas, staying alert when the body should be winding down. That vigilance doesn't end at home. It lingers, disrupting sleep, shortening recovery, and reducing focus the next day. Over time, people begin associating evenings with effort rather than opportunity. Manchester's challenge isn't a loss of energy. It's a loss of predictability after dark. And predictability is what allows adults to plan full days without mental overload. When public spaces feel inconsistent, planning becomes defensive. Time buffers grow. Flexibility shrinks. The city still moves, but it moves more cautiously. That caution has a price. It stretches simple activities into longer tasks and converts leisure hours into managed operations. The real impact isn't visible in crime charts alone. It's felt in how much mental energy it takes just to use the city the way it was designed to be used. Number 4. Leeds. Leeds illustrates a different kind of strain, one driven less by volume and more by unpredictability. Youth-related crime tends to feel more chaotic because it's harder to anticipate. It doesn't follow familiar patterns or predictable locations, and that randomness unsettles daily routines faster than steady trends ever could. When incidents involve younger offenders, residents don't just register risk, they register volatility. That sense of anything could happen anywhere places extra pressure on already stretched local enforcement, especially when youth services, outreach programs, and early intervention resources are thin. Police end up responding rather than preventing, and response-heavy systems are always one step behind. For families, this uncertainty has a direct impact on mobility. School routes are reconsidered. After-school activities get quietly reduced. Parents build more supervision into schedules, not because incidents are constant, but because they feel harder to predict. That added supervision costs time. Mornings become tighter, evenings less flexible, and weekends more structured than planned. Leeds still functions, but family life absorbs the adjustment. Adults juggle work commitments with added logistical planning, and spontaneity fades. Even those without children feel the shift through altered transport habits and reduced willingness to linger in shared spaces. Youth-driven crime also changes how public areas are perceived. Parks, shopping streets, and transport corridors lose their neutral status and start carrying time-based conditions. Fine earlier, questionable later. That conditional thinking fragments the day. Productivity suffers not through fear, but through constant recalibration. Every outing becomes a small planning exercise. Lead situation highlights how gaps in youth support ripple outward into everyday life. When systems designed to guide young people weaken, the burden shifts quietly onto families, commuters, and communities. Not through headlines, but through tightened schedules, shorter horizons, and a growing need to manage movement rather than simply move. Number 5. Sheffield. Sheffield shows how crime doesn't need to surge dramatically to reshape daily life. It only needs to rise quietly. In smaller cities, perception shifts faster because changes are easier to feel. A handful of incidents in familiar areas carries more weight than the same number spread across a megacity. People notice patterns before statistics confirm them. A shop closes earlier. A street feels emptier at certain hours. A routine walk suddenly feels optional rather than automatic. This is where the consequences become loud, even when the rise itself is subtle. Habits start changing before headlines do. Residents don't wait for official confirmation. They respond to the atmosphere. Routes are adjusted. Time slots narrow. Certain errands are postponed or bundled to minimize exposure. What looks like caution on the surface is actually avoidance, and avoidance has a productivity cost. Sheffield's size means people rely heavily on predictability, knowing which places feel neutral, which times feel safe, which paths are efficient. When that predictability weakens, the entire day becomes more fragmented. Simple tasks take longer because choices multiply. Do I go now or later? This way or that way? Stay longer or leave early? Each decision is small, but together they drain mental energy. Unlike large cities, smaller ones don't offer endless alternatives. Avoiding one area often means longer detours or fewer options altogether. That's why the impact feels sharper. The city still functions, but efficiency drops. Productivity doesn't collapse, it erodes. Sheffield's situation highlights a critical point. Crime doesn't have to dominate news cycles to dominate behavior. When people quietly adapt their lives, the signal has already landed. The real cost isn't measured in incidents alone, but in how often residents choose the longer path, the safer hour, or the delayed plan, slowly trading speed and ease for caution without ever being told to do so. Number 6. Liverpool. Liverpool reflects a problem that isn't sudden, but stubborn, cycles that repeat across decades, even as the city itself changes. The details shift, the headlines evolve, but certain crime patterns return often enough to feel familiar. And familiarity is exactly what makes the impact heavier over time. Short shocks create urgency. Long-running issues create fatigue. Communities grow tired of adjusting, and enforcement grows tired of chasing the same problems with limited tools. That double fatigue is where motivation quietly drains away. Residents stop expecting improvement and start planning around persistence. Behavior adapts not in panic, but in resignation. People avoid areas they've avoided for years. Businesses operate within invisible boundaries that everyone understands but rarely discusses. The city keeps moving, but with a sense that some problems are simply part of the background. That mindset is costly. Long-term issues drain motivation faster than sudden spikes because they remove the belief that effort leads to change. Productivity suffers when people feel their adjustments are permanent rather than temporary. Why optimize a routine if the constraints never lift? Why invest energy into flexibility when rigidity feels safer? Over time, that thinking reduces ambition, not just economically, but personally. Enforcement fatigue plays its role, too. When officers and services face the same patterns year after year, responses become reactive rather than preventive. That doesn't mean nothing works. It means progress is slower and harder to notice. Meanwhile, community fatigue shows up in smaller ways. Fewer evening plans, shorter outings, less willingness to engage. Liverpool's challenge isn't a lack of resilience. It's the quiet toll of endurance. Living with unresolved patterns requires constant adjustment, and constant adjustment wears people down. The real damage isn't dramatic disruption. It's the gradual loss of momentum. When long-term issues dominate, people don't feel shocked, they feel stuck. And feeling stuck is one of the fastest ways productivity, focus, and motivation quietly slip away, even in a city known for its energy and spirit. Number 7. Nottingham. Nottingham demonstrates how certain crime types trigger an immediate shock to perception, even when overall numbers haven't exploded. Knife crime carries a different psychological weight because it feels fast, personal, and unpredictable. People don't process it as a distant risk. They internalize it instantly. Behavior changes overnight. Routes that felt normal yesterday feel questionable today. The time of travel becomes more restricted. Spaces that once felt neutral suddenly feel conditional. This is how specific crime types alter behavior far faster than broad statistics ever could. The response isn't fear in the dramatic sense. It's hypervigilance. People scan more, listen harder, stay alert longer. That alertness consumes time, but not on the clock. It shows up as psychological time loss, slower thinking, shorter patience, reduced focus. Tasks take longer because attention is split between what you're doing and what might happen. Nottingham's situation highlights the cost of constant alertness. The body can manage short bursts of vigilance, but sustained awareness drains energy quickly. Even when nothing happens, the effort is still spent. Adults juggling work, family, and responsibilities feel this most. Evenings don't recharge the way they should. Mornings start with mental fatigue already present. Planning becomes defensive rather than efficient. Do I need to leave earlier? Stay closer to others? Avoid that shortcut? Each question steals a little more focus. Over time, this changes how the city is used. People don't stop moving. They move with constraints. That constraint mindset reduces flexibility, which is one of the core drivers of productivity. Nottingham's challenge isn't just incidents themselves, but how sharply they reshape behavior. When alertness becomes the default state, efficiency declines quietly. The cost isn't measured in minutes lost on a journey, but in the mental energy required just to feel settled enough to concentrate. And that energy, once spent, doesn't come back easily. Number 8. Leicester. Leicester highlights how community tension can accelerate the visibility of crime, even before crime itself rises sharply. When social strain builds, incidents feel louder, spread faster, and carry more weight. Trust between groups weakens, and once trust fragments, routines follow. People begin filtering where they go, who they interact with, and when they feel comfortable being present. This isn't always driven by direct experience. It's driven by atmosphere. Conversations change. Local warnings circulate informally. Small incidents are remembered longer and discussed more intensely. The result is a city that feels less cohesive, even if daily life still appears normal on the surface. Fragmented trust leads to fragmented routines. Shared spaces lose their neutral status. Markets, transport hubs, and public streets become time-bound or context-dependent, fine at certain hours, avoided at others. That conditional thinking narrows daily options. Productivity takes a hit through social withdrawal. People reduce non-essential outings, shorten visits, and limit engagement beyond what's necessary. Collaboration suffers. Informal connections weaken. The small social interactions that make urban life efficient, quick chats, spontaneous stops, shared routes, begin to disappear. Over time, isolation grows, not because people want it, but because it feels easier to manage. Leicester's challenge shows how social strain amplifies disruption without needing dramatic spikes in crime. When people no longer assume goodwill or predictability, they retreat into narrower routines. That retreat saves emotional energy in the short term, but costs time and opportunity in the long term. Tasks take longer when networks shrink. Plans become rigid. Flexibility, a key ingredient of productivity, fades. The city doesn't stop functioning, but it stops flowing. And when flow breaks down, everyday life becomes heavier. The real impact isn't fear, it's friction. Friction between people, between places, and between the plans we'd like to make and the ones we feel safe keeping. Number 9. Bradford. Bradford represents what happens when economic pressure concentrates and daily life begins absorbing the strain. Here, crime is often a symptom, not the root cause. When employment is unstable, services are stretched, and opportunities feel limited, pressure builds long before incidents appear in reports. Local services carry the weight, policing, social support, housing, and transport all operating closer to their limits. When systems run hot, Delays multiply. Appointments take longer to secure. Issues require follow-ups. Simple problems stretch across days or weeks. This is where the feeling of being time poor emerges, even for people whose calendars are technically full. Time isn't lost in big chunks. It leaks away through waiting, rescheduling, and managing friction. Residents spend more effort coordinating life than living it. Errands require extra planning. Support services require persistence. Nothing breaks outright, but everything feels slower. That drag creates exhaustion without an obvious cause. Productivity drops not because people are idle, but because energy is spent navigating constraints. Bradford's situation shows how economic pressure zones quietly tax attention. When basic systems feel unreliable, people build buffers into their days. Those buffers protect against disruption, but they also crowd out rest, creativity, and momentum. Overstretched services also shift responsibility onto individuals. People compensate by double-checking, chasing responses, and handling issues themselves. That self-management consumes cognitive bandwidth. The city keeps functioning, but residents operate in problem-solving mode more often than progress mode. Over time, this reshapes priorities. Short-term stability replaces long-term planning. Immediate tasks crowd out future-focused thinking. The result is a community that looks busy but feels stuck. Bradford isn't defined by crime alone. It's defined by pressure accumulation. When economic strain and service overload intersect, time becomes the scarcest resource. People aren't lacking hours. They're lacking usable hours. And that's when productivity quietly slips, not through laziness or fear, but through constant, unavoidable friction built into everyday life. Number 10. Coventry. Coventry captures the strain that comes from transition stress, a city changing faster than the systems designed to support it. Population shifts, new developments, and evolving economic patterns can bring opportunity. But when infrastructure doesn't keep pace, uncertainty fills the gap. Policing capacity often lags behind demographic change, not because of neglect, but because adaptation takes time. That lag creates blind spots. Once predictable areas become inconsistent. Residents sense the change before policies catch up. Daily planning starts to feel provisional rather than routine. People leave earlier than necessary. Build extra buffers into schedules. Avoid assumptions that used to feel safe. This is the hidden cost of uncertainty. When the rules of a place feel unstable, efficiency disappears. Coventry's challenge isn't sudden spikes or long-term stagnation. It's constant adjustment. And constant adjustment is mentally expensive. Every day requires small recalculations. Is this route still fine? Is this area busier than it used to be? Should I rearrange timing just in case? These questions don't signal fear. They signal a lack of reliable reference points. Productivity relies on predictability. When predictability weakens, planning becomes defensive. Time is spent managing possibilities rather than executing plans. Over weeks and months, that mindset reshapes behavior. Flexibility gives way to caution. Spontaneity declines. Even positive change feels heavier when it's unpredictable. Coventry shows how cities in transition can experience pressure without an obvious crisis. On the surface, progress continues. Underneath, uncertainty slows everything down. The city still moves forward, but residents feel less confident moving with it. The real impact isn't disruption, it's hesitation. And hesitation stretches tasks, lengthens days, and quietly drains the focus and momentum people rely on to stay productive in the middle of change. Before you scroll away, pause on this question. How much of your energy is spent managing risk instead of actually building your life? If any part of this reflected your daily routine, share your experience in the comments. Not opinions, just what you've noticed changing around you. If you want to go deeper, watch our previous video on focus, attention, and modern stress. It connects directly to what you've just seen. And if you value calm, structured analysis over noise, support the work by subscribing. It's one click, and it helps us keep these videos thoughtful, researched, and honest.